Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruelest thing Imani Wallace ever did wasn't the cheating rumors or the way she started treating my presence like a favor. It was the night she looked me dead in the face in our townhouse in Charlotte, North Carolina, and said, "I'm the best you'll ever get," right before she locked me out of my own home with an audience. Here's how it happened. My name is Malcolm Reeves. I'm a black man born and raised in North Carolina, the kind of person who believes consistency is louder than talk. I worked long shifts in warehouse operations near the airport, steel-toe boots, a badge clipped to my belt, early mornings that tasted like cold coffee. I wasn't flashy. I was steady. I thought being steady was enough. When I met Imani, she seemed like the kind of woman who loved stability because she had her own ambition. She talked about building and legacy and said she wanted peace. For a while, it felt like peace. We did the normal couple things, weekend grocery runs, late-night takeout, splitting chores, arguing about paint colors like it mattered. The townhouse wasn't some mansion, but it was clean and bright, and I had bought it before I ever met her. It was one of the few things in my life that felt solid, an investment, a roof that belonged to me. When I asked Imani to move in, it felt like inviting her into my future. She called it our place immediately. The shift happened slowly enough that I kept making excuses for it. A new friend group, a new job she loved to name drop, a new tone when she spoke to me, like she was grading me. If I asked where she'd been, she'd sigh like I was exhausted. If I said I missed her, she'd smile without warmth and say I was being dramatic. The compliments faded first, then the affection, then the basic courtesy. I started noticing she only acted sweet when other people were watching. I tried to fix it the way I fixed everything, quietly, practically. I booked a weekend in Asheville, thinking distance from Charlotte would soften whatever sharp edge had settled into our days. She posted the view from the hotel balcony, tagged the location, and ignored me for most of the trip. At dinner, she spent more time on her phone than on her plate. When I asked if something was wrong, she leaned back in her chair and said, "You always need something. You're never satisfied." It was the first time I wondered if I was living beside someone who didn't even like me. By the time the rumors started, I was already tired. A coworker of hers named Kendrick showed up in conversations too often, always presented as harmless. Kendrick said this. Kendrick thinks that. Kendrick told me I should apply for that role. If I asked what Kendrick's last name was, she'd laugh and say, "Why are you being weird?" If I asked why Kendrick was texting after midnight, she'd flip it. "So you're controlling now?" Then she'd talk about how men were insecure and how she refused to be limited. I'm not proud of how long I let myself shrink. I stopped asking questions to avoid fights. I learned to read her moods the way you read weather, deciding whether to speak based on the pressure in the air. Some nights I'd come home and she'd be sweet for 10 minutes, just enough to keep me hoping. Then she'd snap at something small like the way I set my lunch bag on the counter. Her favorite move was to act like I was lucky she tolerated me. Like love was a charity she performed when she felt generous. When she started saying things like, "You wouldn't survive without me," I thought she was joking. Then it stopped sounding like a joke. She got comfortable humiliating me in quiet ways, interrupting me mid-sentence around friends, correcting me like I was a child, rolling her eyes when I spoke about work. If I said I was exhausted, she'd say, "You're always tired. That's why you're stuck." The word "stuck" followed me for weeks. She threw it around like it was my legal name. The week everything broke, my body already knew something was coming. I walked into the townhouse one evening and noticed the living room looked staged, candles, music playing low, like she was setting a scene. But it wasn't romantic. It was performative. I saw a second pair of shoes near the couch, and my stomach tightened. Then Terrence, her older brother, stood up like he'd been waiting for me. Terrence wasn't screaming or threatening. He didn't have to. He had the quiet posture of someone who liked being used as intimidation. Brianna was there too, posted at my kitchen counter with her phone, smirking at whatever she was scrolling like my life was background entertainment. Imani sat on the edge of the sectional with her legs crossed, face calm, eyes sharp. She didn't greet me. She didn't ask how my shift went. She let me stand there in my work clothes like I was an employee coming in late. Then she said it, clear and cold, like she'd practiced in the mirror. "I'm the best you'll ever get." I laughed at first because the sentence didn't fit the moment. It was too big for how small the room suddenly felt. I said her name like a question, Imani, and she tilted her head as if my confusion amused her. She didn't blink. She didn't soften. She just pointed toward the front door. "Take your stuff and go," she said. "You are not sleeping here." The words weren't emotional. They were administrative, like she was canceling a service. I stood there trying to remember what I'd done that day that could justify this. I worked. I paid my part of the bills. I'd driven home thinking I'd shower, eat, and sleep. I looked at Terrence, then Brianna, then Imani again, expecting someone to crack and admit it was a joke. Nobody did. Brianna didn't even look up, just made a little sound through her nose like this was satisfying. That's when my chest started to heat, not with anger yet, but with disbelief that felt dangerous. "I live here," I said, because sometimes saying the obvious is all you have left. "My name is on the deed. I will pay for this." Imani's eyes flicked to Terrence like a cue. Terrence shifted closer to the hallway leading to the bedrooms, blocking it without touching me. He didn't need to. His whole body said, "Try me." Imani's voice stayed bored. "You heard me, Malcolm." She said my name tasted bad. "Don't make this a thing." I took a step toward the hallway anyway, not to fight, just to get my clothes, my work gear, my medication, basic human things. Terrence rose from the couch fully, closing the space. I could smell his cologne, heavy and sweet, covering something mean. Imani lifted her phone in her hand like it was a weapon. "If you try to force your way past him," she said, "I'm calling the police and telling them you scared me." She didn't say it with fear. She said it with certainty, like the system would do the rest for her. Something inside me went cold. Not because I was guilty, but because I understood the trap. It wasn't just being thrown out, it was being framed. It was being turned into a story she could tell with witnesses who would nod along. I looked at Brianna, hoping for basic humanity. Brianna finally looked up, eyes bright with amusement, and snorted like it was a skit. That's when it hit me that the audience was the point. They wanted me to react. They wanted me to give him something to report. My hands shook as I backed away from the hallway. I told myself to breathe, to think. I grabbed what I could without stepping into the bedroom. My laptop bag from the chair, a duffel from the closet by the entry, and my work boots that were still half-laced. I asked for my keys. Imani tossed them toward me like I was a dog catching a toy. Terrence stayed close enough to remind me what would happen if I pushed it. And Imani watched me like she was studying how a person breaks. When I stepped outside onto the walkway, the night air hit me hard. I was still in my work pants. My badge was still clipped to my belt like I might clock back in. I turned toward the glass, thinking there was still a chance she'd come to her senses. Instead, she locked the door, slid the deadbolt, and said through the glass, "You'll be fine." Her voice was almost gentle, which made it worse. Then she leaned closer and added, "Where would you even go? You don't have better." I stood there staring at my reflection in her window, a grown man locked out of his own life like I didn't count. My face felt hot. My stomach felt hollow. The townhouse lights behind her made her look comfortable, like she'd just removed clutter from her space. Terrence moved in the background like a shadow. Brianna laughed at something on her phone. Nobody came out to say it was too far. Nobody told her to stop. The silence after was the loudest part. I walked to my car on autopilot. I sat behind the wheel and just held it, fingers tight, because if I let go, I felt like I might fall apart in pieces. I drove without thinking until I ended up in a grocery store parking lot off South Boulevard. I parked near a light pole, hoping the brightness would keep trouble away. I reclined the seat as far as it would go. The cold crept in around the windows. I woke up every hour, blinking at the ceiling, humiliation sitting on my chest like weight. In the morning, I brushed my teeth in a gas station bathroom and went to work like nothing happened. The job didn't care about my personal life. The clock still wanted my time. I kept my head down, moved pallets, answered emails, and did what I always did. I didn't tell my supervisor. I didn't tell my friends. Shame makes you quiet, like you're trying not to take up too much space in the world after someone convinces you don't deserve it. By lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a text from Imani. "Don't come back." I asked for a civil conversation. I asked to get my things. I asked for a schedule, anything reasonable. She replied with one sentence that felt rehearsed. Stop being dramatic. When I tried calling, she let it ring. When I showed up in daylight once, staying on the sidewalk, she texted, "If you come to the door again, I'm calling the police." The message didn't say, "Please," or "Leave me alone." It said, "I can make you disappear if I want." Days blurred into weeks. Motel rooms started feeling like identical boxes. Thin curtains, the same chemical smell, the same too bright bathroom light. I folded my clothes on beds that weren't mine. I ate drive-through meals because I didn't have a kitchen. I kept my duffel packed because I didn't know when I'd have to move again. Some nights I sat in my car in a motel lot and watched people walk into their rooms laughing, keys in hand, as if normal life was still a thing. I felt like I was watching a world I'd been kicked out of. Imani stayed cruel because cruelty was her comfort. She started posting photos inside the townhouse like she was claiming it publicly. Imani in the living room with her legs over the armrest. Imani in the kitchen holding a wine glass. Imani smiling too wide. Then Kendrick showed up in the background like a shadow that didn't belong. His arm on the back of the couch. His shoes are near the stairs. His reflection in a mirror behind her. She didn't hide it. She displayed it like a trophy. Mutual friends saw those pictures and didn't call me. Instead, I started hearing things secondhand. Imani said y'all were having issues. Imani said you were unstable. Imani said you scared her. Nobody said, "That doesn't sound like Malcolm." Nobody asked how I was sleeping. People choose the easiest story, especially when it comes packaged with confidence. I realized I had been living beside a person who could rewrite reality and have people applaud the handwriting. I tried to stay focused on survival, work, sleep, repeat, but the pain still found me. It showed up when I passed our exit and my body leaned toward home automatically, then corrected itself like a punishment. It showed up when I opened my banking app and saw the same bills still coming through while I paid for motel nights on top of it. It showed up when I realized my clothes, my photos, my tools, the small pieces of my life were trapped behind a door I owned but couldn't access. The worst part wasn't even Kendrick. It was the power Imani took from me by turning my love into a weakness she could step on. She knew I wouldn't explode because I wasn't built that way. She knew I'd try to reason, to be fair, to avoid scenes. That's why she staged it with Terrence and Brianna, because she wanted me to feel outnumbered. She wanted me to leave without a fight, and then tell myself it must have been my fault. Some nights, alone, I almost believed her. One evening after a long shift, I sat in my car outside a cheap motel off Independence Boulevard and stared at my phone until my eyes blurred. Another text from Imani popped up. "Stop begging. You're not coming back." Something in me finally went still. Not numb, clear, like my mind stopped running in circles and landed on one solid thought. This ends legally. I wasn't going to yell through the door. I wasn't going to argue with her friends. I was going to stop letting her control the stage. That night, I didn't fight it. I opened the small fireproof lockbox I've been carrying in my trunk since the first week, my just-in-case box I never imagined needing. Inside was the original deed, the closing documents from before I ever met her, a printed utility account summary with my name on it, and an email thread from the property tax office addressed to me alone. I sat under a parking lot light and stared at the truth until my hands stopped shaking. Paper doesn't care who's louder. The next morning, I called a local attorney in Charlotte, Renee Whitaker, someone a coworker recommended because she was known for being calm and thorough. I didn't tell her I wanted revenge. I told her I wanted my home, my property, and I wanted it done the right way. She listened without interrupting, asked for dates, asked if my name was on the deed, asked if I had texts. When I forwarded the screenshots, especially the one where Imani wrote, "If you show up, I'll tell them you tried something," Renee went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, we're going to handle this." We filed for an unlawful lockout and requested a civil standby so I could retrieve my belongings safely. Renee warned me not to go near the townhouse without an order, not because I was wrong, but because people like Imani weaponize even a moment on the doorstep. I followed every instruction like my life depended on it, because it did. While the paperwork moved, I kept working, kept sleeping in temporary places, kept my receipts, kept my head down. Imani stayed loud online, posting quotes about boundaries and protecting your peace like she hadn't created the chaos. My second move was quiet and practical. I transferred every utility and service account back into my control. Power, water, internet, anything tied to the townhouse that was still in my name. I didn't do it to punish her. I did it because I wasn't going to pay for comfort I wasn't allowed to use. If she wanted to live there like she owned it, she could do what owners do. Take responsibility. I watched the confirmation emails hit my inbox one by one, each one a small door closing on her illusion. My third move was documenting everything, because feelings don't hold up in court. Facts do. I saved every threatening message. I screenshot every post she made that placed her inside the townhouse. I kept the timestamps. I wrote down the names of the people she'd used as witnesses, the date she locked me out, the moment she threatened to call the police with a false story. It wasn't satisfying work. It wasn't cinematic. It was slow, disciplined, and it took my focus off begging for kindness and put it back on protecting myself. Imani didn't know any of this. She stayed cruel because she thought cruel meant safe. She kept moving through life like the consequences were for other people. Terrence posted stories at the townhouse like he lived there. Brianna kept popping up in the background, smiling like she'd helped win a game. Kendrick appeared more openly, standing behind Imani in photos, chest out, confidence borrowed from a situation he didn't understand. None of them looked like people who were worried about paperwork. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Renee while I was at work. My hands were dirty from the floor of the warehouse, and my heart started beating hard before she even finished her first sentence. The judge signed the order, she said. We have a civil standby scheduled. A deputy will meet us at the townhouse. My mouth went dry. I had imagined this moment 100 different ways. Me pounding on the door, me yelling, me collapsing. Instead, it came as a scheduled appointment. It felt almost unreal that my life was about to be returned to me because a judge read facts and agreed with reality. When we arrived, Imani opened the door like she was ready to perform again. Her face was already set in that confident expression, the one she'd used on me through the glass when she said, I'd never do better. Then she saw the deputy beside us, calm and professional, and the folded order in Renee's hand. Something flickered in Imani's eyes, surprise, then irritation, like reality had interrupted her show. Kendrick hovered behind her, half visible on the stairs, suddenly less confident now that authority was in the room. Imani tried to laugh it off. This is ridiculous, she said, voice high and bright, like she was trying to make the deputy feel embarrassed for being there. She tried to talk over Renee. She tried to turn and look at me like I was pathetic. But the deputy didn't care about her story. He cared about what was legal. He asked her to step aside. He explained the order. He used the kind of measured tone that makes it clear your emotions aren't part of the process. I watched Imani's smile tighten like a lid being forced shut. She read the order on the stairs, mouth tightening with every line. I saw her swallow when she reached the part about unlawful lockout and consequences for interference. Kendrick shifted behind her, eyes darting, as if he'd just realized he wasn't standing in a safe little drama anymore. He was standing in someone else's property dispute. He took a step back toward the bedroom like he wanted to disappear into the walls. Imani snapped her head toward him for a second, annoyed, because even then she wanted control of the room. The deputy gave her a time limit and explained what civil standby meant. Renee's voice stayed calm as she told Imani what would happen next if she refused to comply. Imani's face hardened into anger. Not remorse, not shame. Anger that her power wasn't working. She didn't say sorry. She didn't say she'd gone too far. She stared at me like I'd betrayed her by choosing the law over her mood. Then she said, "You're really doing this like I was the one who made it ugly." I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just told the truth once, quietly. I'm getting my things. The deputy stayed close, not because I was dangerous, but because the situation was. I walked through my own front door like I was entering a house that had been vandalized by someone's entitlement. The air smelled different, perfume, cologne, unfamiliar candles. There were shoes by the stairs that weren't mine, a hoodie hanging on a chair that didn't belong to me, evidence of another man's comfort in my space. My throat tightened, but my feet kept moving. We started with the basics, my work clothes, my documents, my personal items. Imani trailed behind us, complaining loudly, calling it unfair, calling it dramatic, calling it harassment. She never once said, "I went too far." Brianna wasn't there this time. Terrence wasn't there either. Without her audience, Imani's performance wouldn't hit the same. She tried to create a scene anyway, but the deputy's presence made her careful. The law was a mirror she couldn't fog up with attitude. When I opened the bedroom closet, I found some of my things shoved to one side, wrinkled like they'd been handled with contempt. My dress shoes were scuffed. A watch my father gave me was missing from the dresser drawer. I didn't accuse her at that moment because I didn't need to. I made notes. I photographed what was damaged. I documented what was gone. Renee had told me, "Let the facts talk." So I let them. Imani watched me writing things down and looked offended, as if being held accountable was disrespectful. Kendrick finally came downstairs when he realized the situation wasn't disappearing. He stood near the kitchen, hands in his pockets, trying to look casual. He didn't look at me directly. He didn't say a word. He just waited for Imani to tell him what to do, like he'd been living off her confidence, and now it was draining fast. When the deputy explained that the property dispute didn't include him at all, Kendrick's face changed. He took a slow step backward, like the floor had become unstable. After the standby, Renee and I walked outside and stood near my car while the deputy finished his notes. "We could take next steps," Renee said, professional as ever. "Lock change. Exclusive possession. Whatever the court grants based on the facts." I nodded, feeling strange, like my body didn't know how to process justice that didn't require me to beg. Imani stood in the doorway, watching, arms crossed, eyes bright with fury. Still no apology. Still no remorse. Just anger that the world wouldn't keep cooperating with her cruelty. The lock change happened fast after that. A locksmith came, professional and quiet. The new keys felt heavier than they should have, as if metal could carry meaning. Kendrick didn't come back once the locks changed. Men like that don't move into responsibility. They move into opportunity. The moment the opportunity required consequences, he vanished. Imani, on the other hand, fought reality until she couldn't. Late bills surfaced, missed payments, service interruptions. The comfort she'd been enjoying started demanding what it always demands: someone to pay attention. Karma didn't come as a viral moment. It came as paperwork and deadlines and systems that don't care about your attitude. It came as notices and consequences and the slow collapse of a life built on intimidation instead of responsibility. I heard later that she tried to tell people I was petty, that I was ruining her, that I was trying to control her. But the law doesn't run on gossip. The law runs on names on documents and dates on messages and the simple truth of who owned what before anyone started performing. The first night I slept in my own bed again, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. The room looked the same but felt different, like the air had been contaminated and was only now clearing. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. No Terrence on the couch. No Brianna laughing in my kitchen. No Imani walking around like my home was her stage. Just quiet, the kind that feels like survival. I didn't post about it. I didn't call anyone to brag. I just breathed like a person who finally has space to exist again. Over the next few months, I renovated the townhouse slowly, not to impress anyone, but to erase the feeling of being trapped in her voice. New paint, new locks, new curtains that let in clean morning light. I donated the furniture that held too many memories, replaced it piece by piece with things I chose without negotiating. I fixed small things around the house with patience, like repairing a life doesn't require drama, just steady hands. People think healing looks like revenge. For me, it looked like a quiet Saturday, with a toolbox and a playlist and no fear. I threw myself into work, not as an escape, but as a rebuild. I took on extra responsibility, earned a promotion, and when an opportunity opened up in Raleigh, I took it. It wasn't running away. It was choosing a place that didn't carry the echo of being locked out. I rented a small apartment at first, closer to the new job, and I didn't tell many people why. I didn't need sympathy. I needed forward motion. I started spending time with coworkers who actually knew me, people who measured me by how I showed up, not by some story someone cruel told to look powerful. The The last thing I ever heard about Imani came from a mutual acquaintance who tried to sound neutral and failed. They said she'd been telling everyone I ruined her life, like her life had been mine to manage, like her choices didn't belong to her, like consequences were something you could blame on the nearest person who refused to be used. I didn't correct her. I didn't defend myself. I had learned that arguing with someone committed to a lie only keeps you trapped in their world. I had already left it. People ask what the comeback felt like, expecting some dramatic speech or some moment where I stood over her and proved I was better. But the comeback wasn't her regret. She never had any. The comeback was watching reality stop cooperating with her cruelty. It was my name on the documents. It was a judge's signature. It was keys in my hand. It was sleeping without fear. And the best part, the private part, was realizing the one thing she said with her whole chest through that glass was wrong. She wasn't the best I'd ever get. She was just the loudest lesson I ever survived. If you made it to the comeback, type Paper Beats Performance in the comments. Like this video if you love quiet justice. No speeches, just consequences. And share this with someone who needs to remember. When they try to trap you emotionally, you can end it legally. The end.